Hey guys, it's Allison Gillen. For this week's discussion, we are talking about young adult realistic fiction. And in the book, it says that realistic fiction is a problem novel, and which was a little confusing for me in the beginning until I continued reading and realized that those problems are problems that young adults face on a daily basis. Friendship, love, loss, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and a host of other things. So when I was choosing my novels for this block, I tried to keep those themes in mind, because the novels we chose were for realistic fiction, but I wanted to make sure that those particular ideas or themes really stood out. So for my first novel, I chose Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. I was made aware when I started trying to find this novel that it is now a major motion picture, which I have not seen, but I will. Also, there is another book for following this that I plan on reading as well. But this book might seem like an unusual choice for realistic fiction, but it deals with a young man, Jacob, who, when he was younger, his grandfather told him all these fantastical tales of living on this beautiful remote island with all of these children that were peculiar. They had different powers. They were able to do different things. And when Jacob hears these things as a young child, he believes them. His grandfather has pictures. He shows him the pictures. But as Jacob gets older and he starts realizing a little more, I guess, about the world, he doesn't believe anymore. He starts looking at the pictures as, oh, well, this could be fake. His own father never believed the stories his father told. So that's kind of where he ends up being. And then his grandfather is murdered, basically. So Jacob goes to this island. He goes to seek out this enchanted island, this island where these peculiars are, in search of trying to understand more about his grandfather and also to understand more about the home that his grandfather stayed in on the island. Throughout his journey, once he gets to the island, there's a whole lot of things going on. I'm not going to tell you what it is if you haven't read the book. But he experiences a lot of different things. He meets a lot of different people with different abilities. And one of the main things that stood out to me in the book, one of the quotes, well, it's not really a quote, but they talk about how the peculiars talk about how they used to be able to be out among the common people. They made a living like at circus sideshows, things like that, where they weren't really too heavily looked at or, focused on. They, most people believe that circus sideshows are just fake. So, that's kind of how these people were taken. But then things changed, and they started looking at these peculiars in a way that was threatening. So they had to go and they made this own island, and the rest, they say, is history. But noting that this book, it deals with normal people and what we call peculiars, and how the two come together and marry together, and why they can't live together, but how their stories intertwine. And it's a really good book. It deals with a lot of issues that young adults might deal with. Feeling isolated, even amongst friends and family. Having issues of depression. Feeling like you are psychologically unfit, also wanting to exert independence, not particularly liking your parents, and wanting to seek adventure, wanting to put their stamp on the world. So it is a great book. It's, again, Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom Riggs. And on the surface, you may not think it would be a good realistic fiction choice, but it actually is. My second selection was The Realm of Possibility by David Levithan. And I mentioned this book last week in our last couple weeks ago in our Judge a Book by Its Cover block. And I talked about this book cover and this ring, and I thought it was like an Irish type of wedding ring, and I was right. And it revealed itself to me in the book. I'm not gonna spoil it for you. But this book was it's set up differently, and I've never read David Levithan before, so I guess for me it was a little. It took me a minute to understand and get into how he wrote this book. This book was told, it's first-person accounts of a number of different characters within the book. And then it also, from these first-person accounts, you learn to understand their relationship with each other. And then through those relationships with each other, you also deal with such topics as, again, friendship, love, romantic, and the kind that's not necessarily romantic, but a little more than friendship. There is sex in there. There's promiscuity in here. There is homosexuality in the book, both for young adult boys and girls. And there is body awareness, anorexia. There's also a young man that works out excessively. And with every single character, you see something that you can pull right out of the list when it talked about in the textbook about what realistic fiction is, the type of scenarios that are encompassed in realistic fiction. It's like checking off a checklist. Check, 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 check. So, again, I have never read David Levithan before, but I definitely want to read more of his books because I like the way he writes. The way he writes is in a format that once you get into it, you can understand that the format he chooses also relates back to the characters. But in The Realm of Possibility, I chose this quote. And to me, this really spoke. It was about a character named Charlotte. She actually went and wrote all over the desks at school. She wrote things like, let me see here. Sorry, I lost my place. You are unable to commiserate, and you are happy even if you are afraid to admit it. You are foolish in your unhappiness. And it's not that she exactly knew what these meant. It's just things that came out to her at that time, and so she wrote them down. She wrote them on school desks. She wrote it on walls. She wrote them on herself. Well, what was interesting to me is how David Levithan then, a couple characters later, applied it to another young lady who had seen the writings. And this girl was kind of the epitome of what you call mean girls. And through those writings, she began to realize that, you know what, maybe she needs to change her life. And she said specifically, we are used to relating words. We don't know what to do with them if they stay. Not on the walls. I'm not talking about the walls. I'm talking about what happens when they stay with us, no matter how many times we let them go. They come back. The words that matter always stay. And that just really jumped out at me and spoke to me, because when she talks about the words that matter that create who we are as people and who help shape young adults. So this was a fantastic book. I encourage anyone to read it, especially those who are teaching young adults. Now, the movie. to be honest with you, I was dreading the movie. My mother passed away from cancer in 2007. So I knew what the movie was about. I knew the premise of the movie. So it was something that I was just dreading from the deep within my soul. But I actually waited till the last minute. I sat down today to watch it. Probably shouldn't have done that because I had what we call one of the ugly cries. But again, this movie is about friendship, love, loss, illness, and coping with all of those. And without giving away I guess everyone here read or watched the movie, but for me, it was very personal because I've been on that journey with my mother. I was there the entire time she was ill. I helped care for her. I went through the ups and downs of her being better and then getting worse and then ultimately passing. And so I know from experience what that feels like. So it was very relevant to me, even though I was dreading watching it. Now, what I liked most about it, or what really stood out to me, and it's something that I've thought about, and my mother and I talked about a great deal, the idea of oblivion, the idea of what comes after this life, and how do we make the biggest impact on our lives, on the world that we're in, especially for after we leave, for when we're gone. And in the movie, Hazel tells Gus, it's not a matter of what great impact we leave on the world, that people write about us or know about us for decades and decades or hundreds of years. It's about what we mean to other people and what other people mean to us. Those relationships, those are the important ones that you need to focus on. Not all of this outside clutter, everything that's going on around that can confuse and make you crazy or make you want or think you want other things. Focus on those who care about you and those who you care about. That's what I took from that movie. And again, like I said, had the big ugly cry. It was definitely very personal for me. A lot of the Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, I didn't really relate to personally, but it was just a good novel, and I can see the value of it for adult young literature. The David Levithan, The Realm of Possibility, this book I do plan on teaching when I start teaching again. This book is just right for many different types of activities, projects, self-exploration, journaling. There's just so much you can do with this book. So for those of you that have not read it, you should definitely give it a look. It may be a little hard to get into, and you have to keep up with the characters, but once you do, you find that it's just it is an amazing little novel. It's a quick read. You can read it in probably 2.5 hours at the most. So again, that is my discussion for this week. I hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you next time. Thank you.